you kind of need to reach a point where, okay, this experiment's not working. Let's open up the feedback loop. I can book 5 people on the ADP list right now in 1 or 2 weeks, have 30-minute session with each of them, get their honest feedback. Now let's act on that feedback and let's experiment again. Let's apply with that new resume, that new case study. You have to have those feedback loops and iterate.
Hello, everyone. In this episode, I'm talking to Mitch Clements, who is a mentor, speaker, and UX manager at a company called SimpleNexus. He shares his career journey and switching from an Android engineer to UX design. He also talks about what a personal brand means for an employee at a company and how you can influence change in a company. Also, we discuss different networking tips by helping design communities and a bunch of actionable job search advice and much more. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Welcome, Mitch. Welcome. Long time no chat, and I'm glad that you joined me on this episode.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so I have quite a few points of discussion today, and looking at your profile and looking at all your activity around the UX career advice and strategy, and all your contributions to the UX community, even outside of your day job, and all your entrepreneurial activities, and almost like a separate path, mentorship. So you have quite a rich profile, and I can clearly see that you're passionate about contributing and giving back to the community, and this is like a perfect match. I think you'll have a lot of things to share, a lot of valuable things to share with the audience. So I'm really glad that you decided to join.
Yeah, I'm happy to share what I can and hopefully it'll be helpful to those listening out there.
Yes, awesome. Let's start with, as usual, with your path, your story. How did it start? What were the key, maybe pivoting moments, or it was like all smooth sailing? And where you're at today?
Yeah, so I never thought I was going to be a designer. My background is actually in computer science, and growing up, I was always fascinated by computers and software and the different possibilities of technology, but I never really knew what I wanted to be. And so once I started attending college at the university, I had no idea what I was going to do. But my parents kind of nudged me to take some computer science classes. And so I did. And from that point on, I thought I was going to be a software developer, a computer engineer. And so that was kind of where my education, professional education, and career started. I eventually became an Android developer. But while I was learning software development, that's when I first heard this term called user experience. And I was super fascinated by it. And I just thought, wow, if I could do that for a living, that would be like the best career ever. And I was taking a user experience class from one of my professors at the university. And obviously, it was very oriented towards developers and software. Didn't really have the design aspect, but I just remember thinking, wow, this is amazing. But I didn't realize it was a career. I didn't know any UX designers. I thought it was just something that the front end engineers did. Like they should take into account usability and take into account making good looking software. And so I ended up doing an internship as an Android developer at a small little startup, but there was a user experience designer there. And I was blown away because I was like, wait, this is a full time job you can do? And so as an intern, I worked really hard to get my coding work done for the day. So then I could volunteer and help out this UX designer with their work because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to better understand this process. And by the end of my internship, I was actually doing more user experience design work than actual coding. And it's a small startup environment where everyone's kind of wearing multiple hats. And so eventually, I was offered a full time position as a software developer, but I countered the offer and asked for a full time position as a UX designer.
Oh, that's
And I was
bold.
terrified. Yeah, I was nervous because you look at the industry stats. Software developers typically have more stable careers, higher salaries. Like I just been given an offer for that, but I just knew I was way more passionate about understanding the end users and building the right solutions for them. And so, fortunately, they accepted my counter offer, and that kind of initiated my path as a user experience designer. And I'll say it hasn't been, completely smooth sailing because I actually at one point became a product manager and then went back to UX design. So I've kind of dabbled everywhere from software development to product management to UX design.
Yeah, it's like you're one of those unicorns that I keep hearing about.
Yeah, I still don't know what unicorn means, but I guess maybe that's one definition. But yeah, it's been a roller coaster of a ride.
Interesting. So, and what do you do today?
So yeah, today I'm a user experience manager. So I manage a team of user experience designers who do both the design and the research. And I'm happy where I'm at. It's kind of my home. I just love being embedded with the UX design team and working together with leadership to prioritize the needs of our users.
While on this topic, maybe you can share what was your from your journey. What were the main, I guess, difference in the skills that are required to transition from a designer to management? Because usually, like, it depends on the company and the size and like the structure. Sometimes it's like a mix. Sometimes it's more like the people management. So, like, from your experience, what did it take to to make this transition happen?
Yeah. One of the things I quickly learned is there's just so many opportunities and pain points not being addressed in many companies, in many places where you work. And so, as a senior user experience designer, I was just proactively doing things I wasn't being asked to do. Things like helping build a design system, helping build a research repository, helping create our product vision and strategy, volunteering to set up um, our data analytics and metrics. I was just constantly kind of proactively putting myself out there to help with a lot of these needs that weren't being met. A lot of these operation roles, building alliances with other departments, and that really kind of just, being proactive, not waiting to be asked to do something, but just identifying a need and then taking initiative, creating a strategy and plan of how we're going to address that. That really helped build my ability to influence as well as lead. And I think management, there's kind of two major parts in my head. One part is people management, so those relationships and skills and coaching and developing others. But another part's also being a leader, inspiring others, leading and helping others to just see the path forward. And so a lot of just those proactive efforts really helped me gain those leadership skills. And then on the side, I was also volunteering as a mentor to mentor designers. And so I was proactively building those people skills as well and coaching others and helping other UX designers.
That's actually a really good advice, and I heard it even like for transitioning from junior to senior, or like the intermediate to senior, like kind of basically going to the next step. It's really not to wait until somebody gives you the tasks and the responsibilities that are at the next level, but seeking them out, because especially for a designer, right? Like usually you would expect a designer has at least an eye for observing and identifying problems around them, uh, even if it's like customer problems or business problems or process problems. There was a gazillion of problems, right? So there's another question about prioritizing and choosing the right ones. But it's really kind of taking this initiative. And at Amazon, there is like this one of the principles that they have is bias for action. So it's really kind of, you don't spend weeks, months trying to figure something out, like kind of trying to get everybody on board, just like go and do it. And this is almost
Yeah.
like the first step towards building this, obviously, multi-step process to get noticed and to almost like advertise or market yourself as the person who can do those things at the next level, at the next step. So it's very similar to, um, yeah, I think like it's universal. And like this particular advice can be applied to growing in a career, even if it's not just management track that you choose to go to.
Yeah, I think a huge part of that is building your personal brand. And when I say personal brand, I'm not necessarily referring to how others might interpret a brand, like having a logo and having, your social media
Business
profile.
cards.
Yeah. But when I refer to personal brand, especially internally at a company, it's, how do others perceive you? What would people in related disciplines say about you? What would the CEO say about you? What would other managers and leaders, developers, product managers, what would they say about you? How do they perceive you? Those that have worked directly with you, and maybe those who you haven't worked directly with, but they see the impact of your actions, the impact of what you're doing. And if you're being perceived as being reliable, being perceived as, getting things done, going above and beyond, that really just helps you progress in your career. Because by the time you're wanting to make that, transition from junior to senior, senior to manager, people already see you as a dependable person. They see you already doing the responsibilities of that role. And then it's just a natural transition or promotion.
Yeah, it's almost like they already see you as that person before you officially become that person. So it's really kind of, yeah. Don't wait until your title changes. I feel like on the paper, just start acting like you're already there. And yeah, I think it's an amazing advice. Speaking of mentorship, because as you said, it was a very important part of your path and growing as a people leader, and also kind of really, yeah, helping people grow. So I saw that you are active on ADPList, right, as a mentor.
Yeah, I've volunteered on there.
Yeah. So and then you also have another like looks like active role, um, front conference and workshop events. So it looks like that you have several different community engagements going in parallel, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you can elaborate a bit more. So first of all, why are you trying to do so many things? Because I've seen that many people just go like choose one platform and just stick with it, but it looks like that you go for variety, for diversity. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I'm always just open to experimenting, to discovering opportunities. And, I've tried so many different communities. Right now, I'm technically part of like 20 different Slack channels, all centered around user experience design and product management. And, I'm only active in two or three of them. But I have those 20 because I just wanted to find like every community out there and see what is that community like? Is it a place that helps build me? Is it a place where I can help build others? And I've really just kind of experimented and found the communities that I really value the most. And naturally, I just wanted to participate in them because they've given me so much and I want to give back. And so as a result of that, yeah, I've volunteered in a lot of different capacities. Some of those you mentioned on ADPList. The Front Product Case Study Conference is one of my favorite conferences in the design and product community. Also, community and part of Product Hive, where I help run their mentorship program. Originally, I joined that program as a mentee, and then I found a lot of value in it, and then I realized they were really in need of help of organizing this program and launching these mentorship cohorts. And one of the things I quickly realized is, you don't have to be a manager or senior designer to go out there and volunteer, to participate in communities. Yeah, and they're always looking for help. They're always looking for volunteers. And it's often just as simple as saying, "Hey, I'm willing to help out." And then before you know it, you you end up in a leadership position where You're giving back to the community, but you're also learning and growing. And that's been a huge part of my career growth and development. Because once again, I don't think there's any single path into UX design. Most universities don't have a user experience design degree. There's not just one path. And so throughout my career, I've just been creating my own path, my own curriculum, and joining these communities and networking.
That's yeah, um, interesting point about maybe that speaks of your personality, and it also ties back to like your first comment about the counter offer, almost like forcing the company to give you the job that you needed or you felt that you needed at the time. Which I'll have a couple of questions after that.
Yeah.
But I think it speaks of like basically your. It feels like that you are more strategic and really more thoughtful about and more intentional about choosing where to spend your time and what to like. It's almost like maybe at the time when you make the decision, it's not as obvious, and you just kind of say yes to everything that seems mildly interesting. But looking backwards, it's almost like that Steve Jobs comment about that he gave at the Stanford speech. The comment about looking backwards, how dots connect. Like all the decisions that you make, they almost like lead you down a almost like predetermined path um, that you don't even see. You cannot really observe or comprehend at the moment when you make that decision or that decision or that decision, but it all plays out nicely then. Looking at kind of all your activity, it's definitely very aligned with what maybe early signals that you showed at the beginning of your career, even like when you were just transitioning from engineering. Very very interesting path. So, a question on the product hive versus ADP list. So, looking at the obviously social media and all this internet hype, so ADP list has grown significantly since the beginning of COVID. I think this was like their main trigger time was around 2020, as far as I recall.
Yeah.
So, and maybe the vast majority of people I speak with, they would refer to ADP list as the place to go and find mentor for a designer. Like,
Mm.
and I think it's like the whole value proposition there is about making mentorship accessible to everyone, something like this.
Right.
So, how, and because you know both organizations, and there are some other ones that are also offering similar service or similar value, uh, who what kind of person, what kind of designer would benefit from Product Hive more versus from ADP List more? Like, if I were to choose a mentorship platform, where would you recommend me to go?
Yeah, that's a great question. And they both definitely have kind of their different strengths.
Hmm.
One of the great things about ADP lists is, yeah, it's a very massive network. It's global. Anyone from anywhere can go on there, and you can book a one-on-one conversation with, just about any designer around the world. It really is incredible what they've done there. That being said, ADP lists, it's more set up as just having kind of one-off conversations
Hmm.
with other designers. What we're doing with the Product Hive mentorship program is we do what's called a cohort, where we pair a mentee and a mentor together for a period of time, typically 3 months, and we expect them to work together and meet every week during that 3 month period. So it's kind of more of a long term mentorship. I mean, I say long term, 3 months really isn't that long, but compared to ADP lists where you sign up for this one-off conversation, but then there's not really a guarantee that you're going to be following up with that mentor for an extended period of time. And so that's kind of one of the major differences of
Hmm.
those two different mentorship programs. And both have their benefits, both have their cons. With Product Hive, it's not necessarily global. It's definitely it's much more of a local community. At least when it originally started, it was just in Utah in the United States, just a small local group. Since then, it's kind of gone to cover most of the United States, and as well as a few, and I see participants from other countries, but it has just a very small, tight knit community in the Slack, majority people based in Utah. And so you get kind of more of a personal connection, personal relationships, a small, tight knit community. And I value having both. I really value having local communities I can be part of that are tight knit. But then there's also just a lot of power in the ADP list model of, how it is accessible for anyone around the world. And so, I mean, ultimately, I just recommend to people just experiment, try things out, and learn what works best for you.
Yeah, I think that's a good concluding advice. Yeah, exactly. Like it's really hard to give one advice that works for everyone the same way. Uh, about everything, it depends, right? So, and also like in this case, it depends. Like which platform should I choose? It depends. Looking for global, or like you're located or live somewhere like in, for example, Asian part of the world, then
Mm.
probably ATP list would make more sense, and so on. So it's definitely, yeah, I think it's a good advice. And is it free, the product hive?
Yeah, it's completely free. It's all volunteer based, and that's kind of part of the community's goals and values is to keep it free, to keep it accessible, and to give back to the community. So we really do value that.
So even more points to trying it out and experimenting and seeing what works for your personality, for your potential even stage in the career too, right? So it's yeah, try it out. It won't hurt. One more question I had for you about your entrepreneurial adventures, and it looks like that you were a founder for a mobile app some time ago. Can you elaborate a bit more on that, and why? And why did you stop playing with this kind of uh, career track?
Yeah, that was kind of actually back earlier in my career when I was primarily an Android developer. And really, the purpose of that mobile app was to build my portfolio. It was less of a monetary gain and more just I'm learning these skills. Let's go apply them.
Hmm.
And I was kind of mutually applying my Android developer skills together with the UX design skills that I was learning. And so I went out and I published a mobile app, and I had a user base and great. At one point it ranked number 2 in the Google Play Store in the lifestyle category for 1 month, which totally caught me off guard. I was never expecting or planning that.
Hmm.
That really became a strong selling point on my resume as an early career developer, early career designer, and yeah, that was kind of just the primary goal of that app is, I've learned these skills. Let's go apply them in action. And then I can demonstrate that to a potential employer. And that was ultimately how I landed that internship as an Android developer was, you know, I I didn't have much in my resume or portfolio. I didn't even have a portfolio, but I said, hey, well, look at this app I made. And I just showed the recruiters that, and they were blown away. And that's what got my foot in the door. And so
Amazing.
as someone who didn't have any formal experience, and I just went out and created my own experience so I could use that to get the roles I wanted and start building the career I wanted.
Yeah, that's amazing. Again, it shows bias for action in action, pun intended. And I think it's actually one of the great benefits of being in the tech world, in the tech profession, right? Engineering, design, I think as well. When you can, and actually, I remember thinking about the same way. How can I really prove to potential recruiters, employers that I can do this job without having previous job title like this, right? So, and I also started with some side projects that I designed and sometimes even like coded, like even before UX, and it definitely helps. First of all, it helps you to think through a more holistic uh, mindset, I guess, about approaching a problem, and even like product management, some product management tasks, engineering if you're also into that. But also for designers right now, with the new trend of no code movement and no
Mm.
code tools,
Yeah.
Nothing stops you from really designing everything, like following the proper user-centered design process, like some kind of side project, or even like an idea that you may be a user of, right? Which is ideal. And then use a few of those no code tools and make it live, make it something that you can really show as an interactive deliverable, interactive asset instead of screenshots of something imaginable. And if you can get like ranked to, in like all the app stores, this would be even much better. I'm sure. So, have you considered going the route of almost like self sustained developer who would be making money on creating apps?
Yeah, it's something I've definitely considered. And as I've been kind of evaluating my career path, my goals, I don't foresee that in the immediate future because there's still just so many experiences I want from working with teams, learning from others. There is a lot of benefit. If you go down the solo entrepreneur track or freelancer, now there's definitely a lot of pros and cons. I think one of the major cons is, it's hard to learn from others in the sense of you don't have coworkers, you don't have teammates, you don't have a managers or leaders that can help you, build
That's
out your
true.
skill set and career.
Hmm.
Obviously there's the benefit of, well, you are your own leader, you are your own boss.
Yeah,
Um, but for me personally, I love collaborating with others. I love working in a tight knit team, and I love learning from leaders and managers that inspire me. And even as a UX manager, I still have a lot to learn. I still have a lot to grow. And so for the foreseeable future, I want to still keep learning, being in teams that build me up. But then maybe 10, 20 years down the road, now I have considered the possibility of doing freelancing or consulting work. But right now, I've kind of looked at my career trajectory, and I just really value being embedded on a team and working with others. And so that's where I kind of see myself for the next while.
it makes sense. Yeah, there are definitely different skill sets and learnings that you can acquire on both sides of this, I guess, spectrum, because
Yeah,
you can be even
I
like,
think for some people, their career goals, I want to be like completely independent as soon as possible, and that's also great. That's kind of the beauty of building your own career is, you decide what you want, and then lay out the steps, create your own path to achieve that. There's not really a right or wrong answer. It's just, what do you want? What kind of life do you want to have? What kind of career? What kind of balance do you want with, family and personal life and your work life? And then just kind of start building that out.
yeah, yeah. Going back to this, it depends hashtag. Speaking of your current role, right, as a manager, as a UX
Yeah.
manager, what's the biggest challenge you can think of? Like maybe like something that keeps you up at night, or something that really maybe a frustrating part about being a UX manager, and how are you trying to solve it, or maybe you have solved it already. But if you have solved it, it wouldn't be bothering you anymore.
Yeah, there's definitely no shortage of challenges. And, we are in challenging times with the economy. A lot of companies are experiencing layoffs. And, unfortunately, my company wasn't invincible from that either. The economy and, we're in the mortgage industry. And if anyone's followed the mortgage and real estate industry for the past few years, it's been crazy with interest rates and home values and home availability. And market forces do impact your company, and unfortunately that impacted part of our UX team. And I was recently reading the UX Collective. They released kind of a yearly trend report of, the trends they foresee in the future or what are happening. And one of the ones I identified is, designers are being expected to do more with less. I
Mm,
think a lot of designers are feeling that across different industries, across different companies. There's a lot of demand and high expectations. And so, It can be difficult trying to manage those expectations. There's a lot expected of your role, a lot of skills that you're expected to learn and to do, and you got to balance that with your team morale, with how many members you have, with your resources available to execute what you need to execute on. And so that is something that that is a reality. Almost every company is facing that, and it requires making some hard decisions there, and just really trying to prioritize and focus on what matters most.
Hmm. Hmm. Uh, if you ignore, or at least for now, ignore the current situation, like in the market, which is definitely impacting and has been impacting so many companies around the world. Uh, Besides that, any kind of biggest, I guess, problems that a UX manager faces?
Yeah, in terms of other challenge areas, every company has their strengths and weaknesses, and often your responsibility as a manager is kind of identify where are the areas we're weak in and what's our game plan to solve that. And so, something that I've really been working on and pushing my company is with our data analytics and making data informed decisions. And there's so much opportunity there, but change management is hard. It's hard
Mhm.
getting all of the software engineering organization and product management organization and UX design organization, getting everyone bought into implementing data analytic tools, identifying kind of your metrics and outcomes you're working towards. It's always a challenge to change your organization, change behavior, but it's well worth it. It's well worth the effort. And yeah, I think depending on the company, for some companies, it's their data analytics. For others, it's their user research process and operations. For others, it might just be lack of having a clear vision and strategy. And in my time, I've worked in all these areas of just really kind of pushing the organization to adopt these important things and implement them. And it's hard doing these large scale efforts, but it's always worth it, and it's very fulfilling in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Transformation and like really change management is a huge pain point. I clearly recall how at one of the big companies when I was a part of, they were trying to roll out like Adobe Analytics
Mm.
suite, and like all the tagging and everything. Oh, it was so painful. There's like so much effort from so many teams. So definitely was a big initiative. But as you are saying, like long term, it's definitely it's a good choice. It's just really a matter of kind of convincing the leadership who makes the decisions and like budget allocations, all that stuff,
Yeah,
to prioritize this over some like 20 other things that are also high priority. So maybe you can maybe you have some maybe tips and tricks. How do you really push this what's the term, like rock stone up the hill? How do you really find ways to convince leadership, people who make decisions, to go and do this?
yeah. One of the most important key parts, whether you're trying to implement a design system or a research repository or analytic tools or whatever that uphill battle is, you really need to identify the key decision makers as well as the key influencers. I think those key influencers, they're often people not in leadership, but it might be a developer that the entire development team looks up to. And you just know, if that person gets bought into the design system, like all the other developers are going to follow because they respect that individual, they trust that individual. Might be a senior developer or principal engineer. But it's really essential that you identify those key influencers, and you get them bought in. You find those people that share your values, who see the value proposition of the effort of solving the obstacle, You get that initial support, and then you start painting the picture of where you're at and where you want to be. So in the case of a design system, maybe you audit your current product. Here's what it looks like today. Here's all the inconsistencies. And then you show a glimpse of the future, the vision of here's what we could be like. Here's, how much money we could save if we were using these reusable components, painting the benefits, showing that future state. And then the most crucial part is coming up with a game plan to get there, a strategy, well, what's step one? What's step two? What's step three? And then once you've kind of taken that all together, you have a business case. You have a vision, you have a strategy, you have a plan, you have where we're at, where we want to be. And often that's what leadership is looking for is they want to understand the value, but they also want to know what's the game plan? How are we going to do this? How are we going to roll this out? And these efforts are often not just, they're not in a sprint, they're not a few weeks, they're often in like a year or two of because you can't just disrupt the entire current roadmap or current plans or
Yeah.
maybe you don't have the current hiring headcount, but you got to make the plan of how you're going to get there, and that usually gets people excited when they see that.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a good advice. It reminds me, I think I read something about similar approach of trying to influence leadership and decisions at a company. There is a book articulating design decisions or design thinking. One of the
Mm.
kind of recommended books from the, I guess, top 100 list or something. And yeah, it was also kind of really one of the tips that I remembered was that try to find people who are influencers in the company and almost like get them into your camp before trying to pitch to kind of leadership, because usually leadership there are more like people managers and really kind of strategic thinkers, but for some, I guess, more function specific insights, they usually rely on opinions of an expert in that function, right? Like as a maybe principal engineer or maybe some design lead or something like this. And they would often really rely on their point of view and their buy-in and trust them, obviously, if there's trust in the team. So it's very similar advice. I like it. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And uh, one other thing I just wanted to emphasize is you don't have to be a senior designer or a manager to do this kind of stuff. Anyone in the organization can initiate change. I've seen interns do this where they come in, they see a problem, a gap, an opportunity, and they start rallying people together. They start painting that picture. They come up with a plan and strategy. Now, you can be a junior designer and implement a design system or a research repository. You don't have to wait for leaders to do this. And ultimately, that's going to probably what propels you to end up becoming a leader in your career is, you're not being asked to do this. You're just going out of your way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's actually, to speaking of interns, from, I guess, my limited experience, at least working close or at least observing how interns work, very often they actually bring really interesting perspectives to a team. And they really identify problems that like lots of people just forgot about or
Mm.
just got used to, right? Like the way it works, because it's so easy, like especially when you're in this non-stop cycle of releases features, it's really easy to just kind of focus on that part of the of overall, I guess, ecosystem. And then when somebody from the outside point of view comes in, especially when they have time, that's like another component to this. In interns, they yeah, quite often I remember like really good, interesting, new, fresh ideas. Not all of them, they were, I guess, they would go through the filter of ROI and the impact, and if it's the right thing to do right now. So that's kind of a different conversation. But the ideas are definitely there, like, and definitely they have not unique, maybe unique perspective and an eye for problems. So yeah, and the really good point about you don't have to be in the senior position to push a change like this. It may be a bit more challenging, I think, if you don't have enough. clout in the company, enough like trust and reputation. So you'll have to convince more folks in this hierarchy, regardless of how many layers a
Yeah.
company has. But it's still possible, and I think that's really, you're totally right. I agree with you that it's probably the best way to show to your leadership or management team that you can do this job at the next level and consistently. And yeah, it's like the next time they'll be thinking about somebody to take on like maybe another project that's maybe out of your current scope. They may think about of you, and there's another opportunity to grow and yeah, kind of market yourself as a leader. That's good.
Yeah.
Love it.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the future of UX as a profession. And with all the recent, I guess, time saving, let's call them time saving tools for some activities, I'm curious to hear what's your opinion? What are your thoughts on how one can future proof their, I guess, career if they want to stay in UX, and how they can, because there are lots of negative, and I'm talking about AI developments and like all this chat GPT stuff.
Yeah.
There are lots of, it's almost like two camps. So there's like optimists, technology optimists, and they think that this is almost like a calculator that will help you do some repetitive tasks faster, which I probably kind of lean in that way a bit more. And there is another camp who are really pessimistic and really cautious about losing a job or like that it will replace a bunch of folks and professions and stuff, which I'm also somewhat there. I'm kind of mixed because I think like for some, especially if you think about UX design as a field, right? There are so many, especially with like larger companies, when they go into more specialized roles. Even 5 years ago, I was already seeing. I think like one of the pivoting um, moments for me was there was an old demo from Airbnb design system team, I think, and I'll share with you if you haven't seen it. So the idea was that somebody was drawing just on a whiteboard some layout of a page, very simple page with like some boxes, some circles, something, and then AI system that they built in house was analyzing kind of image recognition technology on this whiteboard, recognizing the shapes and stuff, and connecting it automatically to the design system components
Mm.
and compiling like the visual design of the page.
Yeah.
Like, and it was like, what the hell at the time? Now it's obviously kind of a more common and more advanced. But at that time, I was already kind of okay. So if we're going this route, which of those, I guess, subsections within the whole UX design profession will be kind of automated earlier, or at least kind of somewhat taken over for more simple tasks earlier? And for my conclusion was like the later to the, I guess, delivery, like the visual design, like all this kind of the UI stuff, would be easier, especially with that demo. Obviously, would be first to be automated. And then like more kind of thinking and talking to people and really understanding the problem, like more like strategic work, would be more, I guess, would be automated later. At least
Mm.
let's put it this way. Okay, so really long question with some kind of my thoughts embedded here. But curious to hear your thoughts on AI and how it will disrupt or help our profession.
Yeah, I mean, AI is definitely the buzzword right now. I think Chat GTP, they've really demonstrated to the world of here's a working prototype, anyone can try it out. And now everyone's wondering like, oh, is Google going to go out of business? Because what if this replaces engine search? And
Yeah,
the reality is Google already has an AI prototype that's even better than ChatGTP. They
just
just
not public.
haven't released it publicly because
Yeah,
there's still a lot of issues. There's a lot of ethical issues, moral issues, plagiarism. Um, I asked ChatGTP a question and it flat out gave me the wrong answer.
yeah,
And
I've heard
there's
about
kind of the
this.
problem of, well, where's it getting? What are the sources? And
Exactly.
there's still you still have to use critical thinking. You have to evaluate. You can't just ask the internet a question and believe everything you see and you hear. There's still critical thinking to evaluate, is that accurate? Is that a reliable source? What is that source coming from? And so, there's definitely limitations. That being said, like I am optimistic about the future of using artificial intelligence in the design process. I know the number one thing nobody enjoys is documentation. Whether it's documentation for your design system, for your product, everywhere I go, every company is struggling with documentation. Documentation is always outdated, it's always missing
Hmm.
info. And just imagine a future where AI can do the documentation for us, or a future where AI can organize your research repository, make it easier for everyone else to find relevant research that's already been performed at your company. And to your point of design systems, the if you're at a company that doesn't have a design system, it takes a lot of work to produce UI because you're starting with a blank slate. You gotta come up with all the colors and the styles and the rules. But if you're at a company that has a really robust design system and component library, and there's very helpful documentation on when do we use this component, when do we not use that. Well, one of the beauties of that is if you have this guideline and system of rules, then yeah, let's train an AI to understand your design system and then spit out three different recommendations. And then you as a UX designer go in and fill the gaps of, well, here are the pros and cons. Let's go test this with users. Or, this is part of the design system where we need to break the rules or we need to add a new rule. Artificial intelligence is just going to follow the rules it's been given. And there's still that critical thinking that needs to happen of, did what it output or produce, does that match the outcomes we want? And I could probably dive on this topic for we could go on and on
Big
about
topic, yeah.
all the trends, but I am optimistic. I think it will empower designers and will empower people as it grows, as we still put our critical thinking caps on, and we can use it as a tool to help us. Um, so I am optimistic in that sense. At the same time, I still think it is a buzzword. It's a trend. It still has a ways to go. We're seeing a lot of the issues and shortcomings of it popping up everywhere. It still needs to be refined. And with any trend, and there's always trends in the design industry, whether it's visual design trends, whether it's tools. We used to think Sketch was the top leading tool, and then Figma came and replaced it. And in a future day, Figma is going to be replaced by another tool. There's always going to be trends, things rising and falling.
Hmm.
But I always try to look for are the principles. I think a lot of principles in the design world don't change, whether it's psychology and human behavior, or even the principles of what makes a good leader. It's not a micromanager. It's not someone who criticizes others. It's someone who's positive, supportive, leads, inspires. And so when you look at all these things, I evaluate the principles of how can this new tool, this new trend technology help me with the principles I believe in, like not doing redundant or wasted work. How can it help me with that? How can it help me be more efficient? How can it help me serve my users better? That's how I usually view trends is, match it to your principles and values and then see if it can either, if it helps or hinders that. And just as always, be open to change though. If you are not open to change, UX design is not the right career for you. Imagine if someone with the rise of smartphones and mobile apps, someone said, like, no, this is just a trend. Like, I'm never going to design for mobile. I mean, now everyone has a mobile phone with apps. Mobile responsive websites are important. So you have to be open to change, though, and to the trends, but also have your values and principles.
Yeah. Speaking of change, actually, just maybe a couple of days ago, uh, I went to bed and I was thinking, like, somehow I don't know why, but I recalled how somebody from my kind of parents, friends, and they were like, I think in the education space, like traditional space. It was like a couple, maybe 20 years ago. And I clearly remember some, I don't know why, but it kind of stuck in my memory that they were going for once a year, they would go for, uh, I think they called it like, uh, what's the term? So some kind of a almost like a mini conference for this
Mm.
profession, where they learn new stuff, new kind of uh, technologies, new maybe programs, new ideas, and it was like once a year. And I'm thinking like about the UX design space, and like oh, in general, like the tech world, right? Like it's almost like daily you have to learn something new, and like you have to keep up with this. You cannot really wait till the next annual conference to go and like check it.
Yeah.
So and like obviously we have our own events, so it's like a bit different medium. But for some professions outside of tech, it's like the pace of learning is definitely very different. So and I agree that you have to be ready for like almost like lifelong learning uh, course of sorts if you want to be in UX or in tech in general. I agree. The way how I think I saw an interesting quote on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, and I really liked like the I think almost like the mindset, especially like about learning and trying to be more open to the new ideas and new trends, even to try it. Is is going like this: AI will not replace you, or will not take your job. Another person who uses AI will. So it's kind of like really, yeah, changes your perspective. Really, kind of that you're almost like FOMO, like missing out on ignoring those trends. So it's almost,
Yeah.
especially in our industry, it's better to, especially for something disruptive, potential disruptive like this. It's definitely, yeah, waiting time is maybe not to your advantage.
Yeah, definitely. Once again, as a UX designer, the majority of UX designers are working on technology, on software, mobile apps, websites. We're in the technology industry. There's constant innovation. There's constant change, and that is just kind of one of the realities of the job. But once again, any innovation, any change, it's ultimately just a tool. There's going to be people that use that tool to essentially kind of destroy their own careers, I almost want to say, because they might become too reliant on it. They're not going to see the shortcomings of that innovation, that tool. But then there's going to be those who see, okay, here's the pros and cons, and here's how I'm going to maximize the pros and reduce the risk of the cons. And so, once again with AI, like, yeah, it can be an amazing tool as long as you're still using that critical thinking. You're making sure you're not plagiarizing. If it's just copying content out there on the internet and then pasting in, now you're copying and pasting that. You've essentially stole that from someone else without knowing it. So as long as you're just,
Yeah,
aware of the shortcomings and mitigating those risks, then yeah, you can use it in ways to elevate your career, elevate your skills. But yeah, as always, it takes that critical thinking. You have to be able to discern when to use it, when to not use it.
yeah, I agree. Okay, let's go to
To
the
the
next
next.
section of our conversation, which is related to more like tactical and maybe actually some strategic advice and tips on resumes, portfolios, like especially for you who was a designer yourself, and now you're on the other side of this hiring, let's say relationship as a hiring manager, right? So maybe you can share some red flags, some do's and don'ts, pros and cons, all this stuff, especially during this time when more and more, m- very often more qualified folks are joining the job market, and you're kind of competing with a bigger pool. So employers have more choice, right? Especially with all the layoffs and like thousands of people joining the already saturated market, especially like for intermediate junior folks.
Yeah.
So maybe you can share advice on that. Um, yeah.
Yeah. The fun thing with resume advice and portfolio advice, it's really hard to give because every hiring manager has their own opinions. And you see these opinions battle it out on LinkedIn like, should a resume
Yes.
only be one page or can it be more? And, there's people that are passionate. They'll passionately say, I would never hire someone with a resume longer than one page.
Yes.
And so, there's always these extremes. And that's what's so tricky with resume and portfolio advice. So, usually the advice I give, I try to apply to the majority. um, well, what do the majority of managers agree with? Or it's really important to identify, what are the types of companies I want to be hired by, and what is their perspective on this? Some companies really value formal education. Others, they don't care how you got your education; they just care you have the skills. All that being said, some of the things I've seen that really can help make an individual stand out is always focus on the outcomes and the impact. For every portfolio project or resume bullet point, think about what is the impact I had or the outcome of this skill I have or work that I did. And that can be a business outcome, that can be a team outcome, that can be an outcome for your users. But really try to measure that, try to quantify that. That will really help you stand out. The example I like to give is, anyone can say, I redesigned a landing page. Any resume can have that bullet point. I designed a landing page. But if you really want to stand out from the hundreds of resumes saying, yeah, I designed an app, I designed a landing page, well, the ones that really stand out as they explain the so what. You designed that, so what? What impact did that have? Did that increase conversion rates or adoption? Did that, how did that perform in usability testing? Or maybe you did a process or framework, to our previous conversation of you help push for a design system, a research repository, you help your team adopt analytic tools. And what is the impact of that? How did that save people time? How did that make the company money? How did that help your team? How did that help your users? Always just focus on the impact. Because one of the hardest things for me as a hiring manager is, I see a lot of resumes that say, yeah, I have skills in this. But then, a junior, an intern can say, I have skills in wireframing. And a principal designer could say the same thing. But then, what's the difference? Both of them have the same skill. And I really want to know how have you used that skill? What is your capacity in that skill? How competent are you? And what changes in the world have you made using that skill? That's one of just my biggest recommendations. If you want to stand out in this crowded market, really focus on the impact of your skills, of your case studies, of everything you do, and always be trying to measure that, try to quantify that, try to capture that, and then figure out how to clearly communicate that to the recruiter, to the hiring manager. So those are almost always the ones that are going to stand out.
Sounds good. How about maybe job search strategies to get through this phase, especially during, like, again, overwhelming number of applications for jobs, for fewer number of jobs, right?
Yeah.
How would you really approach job search process today?
Yeah. One of the principles I'm a strong believer in is networking. Um, a lot of people have different opinions on what networking means or what it is. Personally, for me, networking has always been less about me asking others for help and more so me giving to communities, me building relationships. And so I would just highly recommend to anyone, make sure you're networking, but remember, networking is less about others giving stuff to you, but more about what are you giving to others. And that's a part of the reason why, we mentioned before, I volunteer in so many different communities. Through that volunteer work, through building those relationships, I've really been able to build a big network, a big community. And, that network can be so powerful in helping you get that next job or helping you identify those job opportunities that haven't even been published yet. But the company internally knows, yeah, we're getting ready to hire for this role. And you want them to think of you. You want your name, your face to pop up in their minds. Or, if they share that in one of those communities, you want to be the first person to be ready, be available to meet that need for them. Blindly applying to job postings, it's really tough. Because I see a lot of designers say, I applied to 100 job postings,
Yeah.
never heard back. And that really is hard. It's demoralizing. But meanwhile, you see other people of, well, I networked and I only needed to apply to 3 and I got 1. And, there is just much more effective strategies and ways going about this. And a lot of it does come down to relationships and networking and standing out there.
Yeah, I agree. And I was given kind of similar advice even before the layoffs when the
Mm,
market was super hot, because even then, especially for like first job, second job, like early in the career, the market was so, I guess, unbalanced, right? Like
yeah.
the pool of candidates, that like there is such a huge number of them, especially coming from all the boot camps and all the shorter programs. So it's just like pumping them like every day somebody was another cohort of new joiners. But it's the opposite on the other side of the spectrum, like on the seniority level scale.
Yeah.
So, and even then, like I was really kind of, yeah, like applying to just hundreds of jobs per week is almost the not the best ROI on your time, right?
Mm,
And also thinking from like the networking comment that you made on really building these relationships and not just sending a call message on LinkedIn asking to refer me, is definitely a more longer term thinking about multi-year, almost like potentially for life relationship building with potentially influence, like people who may become influential in future, even if they are kind of have a limited role today. So, and it kind of almost like this compound interest, right? The concept from
yeah.
the financial world, when it's not like one off, but it's really kind of you are giving back, and like it's almost you grow in your karma in the industry, in the community, and yeah, I believe it will pay off. Like it's like you don't have to wait for this, and you don't have to do it like on purpose just for that. But my belief is like the more good you do to the world will give back to you. Like it's almost like you give first, and then the world will respond with what you almost like invested in, like with your time, with
Yeah.
your potential introductions, connections, value that you brought to somebody. So I think, yeah, it's definitely an amazing advice. And yeah, applying, like I've been in these shoes like early in the career, even when I was applying for jobs maybe 10 years ago. I was really going through like applying to whatever was posted on job boards, on like Indeed. Even Craigslist was still alive at that point for jobs, and it was definitely demoralizing when you just week after week there is like one response, or then like ghosting, and it was, yeah, definitely painful phase. And I think now it's even worse, like with
Yeah.
especially companies trying to um, account for the increased number of applications by introducing more and more automated tools, right? To filter, to screen, to just kind of automatically reject candidates just because they don't have enough human power to review each single resume, or the quality of these, I guess, checks goes to like from 5 seconds to 1 second. If I don't see any numbers in the accomplishments, like the next one.
Yeah. Yeah. And once again, it goes back to my earlier principle of, I mentioned I'm always experimenting. I'm always trying to find what works, whether and I recommend that advice also to anyone out there. If you've been applying to multiple positions and you're not hearing back, nothing's working out. Well, okay, go on ADP list, book 5 different sessions with specific, with designers from those companies you applied to, or just, any designers that you think could be qualified to give you feedback. And then, get feedback on your resume, on your portfolio, have an open mind. You're probably going to hear some things that are hard, some things you don't want to hear, like, yeah,
Yeah.
you're,
Bring
you know,
your napkins.
yeah, it's going to be hard, but I would rather do that than just keep applying and not having success. You kind of need to reach a point where, okay, this experiment's not working. Let's open up
Yeah.
the feedback loop. I can book 5 people on the ADP list right now in 1 or 2 weeks, have 30-minute session with each of them, get their honest feedback. Now let's act on that feedback and let's experiment again. Let's apply with that new resume, that new case study. You have to have those feedback loops and iterate. And we tell designers that all the time. You should be iterating on what you're building for your
Yes.
users. You also got to be iterating on yourself and accepting feedback and improving there. And you'll get more. It's still going to be hard. It's not going to be easy, but you'll get more momentum. You'll start getting the right trajectory you need.
Exactly. It's almost like it could be even like a soft nudge that will push you in the right direction to maybe change something in the resume, or even like the way how you write emails in the follow-ups to the interview. So like it's
Yeah,
yeah, I really like the idea of like really iteration and the lean startup of you, so to say, when or like your job search when you try like almost like run a prototype of sorts, like some kind of limited time frame experiment and evaluate results, analyze if it works, if it doesn't, change something, and like so on. Like it's almost like going through this iteration process. I love
yeah.
it. Awesome. One last question: if money wasn't a question for you, if you didn't have to worry about money, what would you do?
Oh, it's a good question. I've wondered about that a few times because sometimes my answer's been, well, I'd keep doing UX design because I love this discipline so much. But I do have hobbies. We've been talking a lot about work related things, and one thing I do want to make clear is, I volunteer in a lot of these groups and do a lot of these extracurricular things. But I'm also just as proactive of balancing that with my hobbies, with my family, with my personal life and mental health. One of my recent hobbies has been miniature toy photography. And so basically, one example is my wife and I went to Alaska, which is just a beautiful, giant place with lots of nature. And I just got little toy dinosaurs and like placed them around, and you take the right angle with a picture, and it looks like a
Mm,
life size dinosaur with a scenic landscape. Or that's been a fun hobby. And I don't know, maybe I would just do that all the time, but
no, I doubt it.
uh,
Thinking like hearing how you like to experiment and really, yeah, it feels like that you'll be more into teaching and something more kind of contributing back. It feels like you're really passionate about this kind of giving back and helping others grow, especially as also like UX manager right now. It kind
yeah.
of contributes to that passion. Yeah, helps. Awesome. Okay, so last question before we wrap up, because you're so active on all the platforms, where can people go and find you and potentially follow up and maybe ask more questions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm active on a lot of platforms. The one I'm most active on is LinkedIn. So if anyone, yeah, especially if anyone has kind of follow up questions, you're listening to this and maybe something wasn't clear or you want to ask me something, then yeah, just reach out to me on LinkedIn, send a message to me. I'm always happy to chat. I'm always happy to help answer questions. Or if you just want to follow me for more insights, that's it's the one I'm the most active on. So yeah.
Sounds good. Awesome. And I'll include the links in the show notes as well. Okay, that's it for today. It was really interesting and packed with valuable and actionable insights and advice. Thank you, Mitch. Thanks for coming and thanks for sharing your lessons learned and your takeaways from your career.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, I loved it. Awesome.